here, Sonia.
Una cucaracha.
We'll pussy fuck on Chill.
Ah, j'ai take the test.
沖縄はどこですか？
沖縄どこですか？はい、違いますね。はい、次。
I think that it's important for you to know a language other than your own because it can help you connect with a person on a different level.
Fußball gefällt mir.
I want them to become world citizens, not just a citizen of their own community.
We all experience the same things. We all have the same basic wants and needs.
You get to speak with people that you might not have been able to speak with before, learn a little bit more about their culture. It could change your life, learning more about how somebody else lives their life. So I think it's vital.
Latin is not the kind of language that you can say, oh, I took Latin because I'm going to go to the land of Latin and speak it. In reality, everything is the world of Latin.
Well, you learn a lot about history and a lot about culture and also the words and how it helps in English, and Latin is used in law and medicine.
I guess I was into Greek culture and I was into a lot of Roman history, and I mean, it's good for writing poetry. That's what I like to do.
My name is Laurie DeBerry. I teach Latin levels 1 through 4 at Westfield High School in Chantilly, Virginia.
At the start of this tri-level class, the Level 4 students work independently, translating a passage from Virgil. Simultaneously, the Level 2 and 3 students are guided through an activity to distinguish between translation and interpretation using works from Cicero and Mozart.
Just in space with the spheres, the planets.
The whole class then comes together to create their own versions of Latin manuscripts and to make historical connections.
Yeah, it is. There are 33 students, 3 of whom are Latin 4 AP reading Virgil, and 12 are Latin 2, and the balance are Latin 3. The Latin 3 curriculum is really the first time that students are seeing real Latin, in that it's not written by a modern author. In your reading language, to know what's the author saying, what's the tone, what's the overarching theme of the work.
The eyes turning upon the sun.
Okay, salvete omnes. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with our USAs. Would you please take out the USAs section of your notebook? We're going to pick up a pink piece of...
As a warm-up activity, Ms. DeBerry prepares her students to listen to an excerpt of Mozart's opera Il Sogno di Scipione. The opera is an 18th century Italian interpretation of Cicero's original Somnium Scipionis, taken from his work De Republica in 51 BC.
Joe?
We've been listening to opera. Yes. Derived from the Latin text that we're reading, the Somnium Scipionis, to get a feel for how it would sound in an opera.
Very good. Okay, we're going to listen to aria number 3 today. So I've typed up aria number 3. We're not going to listen to the entire aria. We're going to listen to about a minute of it because we remember, what's the format of an aria? Alex?
It has an introduction.
Okay, it has an introduction, and what else does it have? Does it have full orchestration, or is it conversation?
It's just conversation.
No, the opposite of conversation, right? The aria is the opposite. It's full orchestration. It's full orchestration, that's right. That's right. And it tends to be shorter, correct? It tends to be shorter, and there tends to be lots of repetition. I want you, as you're listening to this, to think about the question at the top of your page. What does the question say? Justin?
Compare aria 3 with chapter 18 of Somnium Scipionis. How is the opera not a translation, but merely an interpretation of the Latin?
Okay. You'll remember chapter 18 from the Somnium. It talks about the Nile. And remember, kata dupa. Remember, what does kata dupa mean? Does anyone remember what kata dupa means?
Waterfall?
Means waterfall, that's right. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's listen to aria 3. Also, I want you to listen to the tempo of the music and listen to how the music is mirroring what the text is saying, okay? Okay, so here we go.
Knowing that I was going to teach the Somnium, I did a little bit of research and found this opera, Mozart's Sogno di Scipione. And going through the opera and looking at the opera, I saw that there were a lot of issues pertaining to the Latin that would be interesting for the kids to really investigate and explore. So today, the actual libretto, the words, were an interpretation as opposed to a translation, and that's a really important distinction for students to make the difference between translation and interpretation.
Okay, let's talk for a minute just about the form of the music. Okay, how is the form of the music mirroring the text? What's going up and down in the opera?
The Nile.
The Nile, that's right. And what's it doing? It's rushing, and it says it's falling, right? It actually uses the word falling. Can you see in the Italian what word is falling?
Cadente.
Cadente, that's exactly right. Now, let's go back to the question. How is this not a translation? Justin, do you have your translation out?
I do.
You do. Okay, can you read back for us chapter 18?
This is, he said, that sound which is separated by uneven intervals, but nevertheless separate according to a fixed proportion by reason.
We start to talk a little bit about poetry and how the prose of Cicero translates into the poetry of music.
And tempering the sharps with the deep it causes the various harmonies equally.
The nice thing about the literature that we've chosen for the Latin 3 curriculum is that there is something for everyone. You don't even have to separate the class. When you look across the room, you have level 2 students sitting next to level 3 students.
Just as others who have cultivated divine studies with extraordinary talents in human life.
Very good. Okay, so we have the precursor to the Nile rushing in Catadupa. Okay, what is Cicero saying about the spheres of music?
There were high and low pitches.
And do we hear those high and low pitches on earth?
No, we can't, but it says that learned men have imitated with strings or on strings.
Very good. Okay, and those high and low pitches which we can't hear, why can't we hear them?
They exist in space with the spheres, the planets, I guess.
Okay, they exist in heaven, but also what else?
We're so used to hearing the sound that we don't even notice it anymore.
That's right. We're so used to hearing it that we don't even notice it. Just like in the opera, we have, "He who on the banks of the falling Nile lives does not hear the noise of that raging torrent." The idea was the music of the spheres is going on in the heavens. We don't notice it because we hear it all the time. We've been hearing it for millions of years. Okay?
So by looking at the libretto and looking at the themes of the opera as opposed to what Cicero has written, it really brings into the forefront the difference between translation and interpretation.
Very good. Let's break down into our groups. What I want you to do is I want you to pick up the blue piece of paper off of your desks. Okay?
After we listened to the opera, the students were sitting in groups and were asked to go over the previous night's homework was the translation of part of chapter 20 and 21 of Somnium Scipionis. And within the group, they were asked to answer one question. Each table was assigned a question, and as a group, they were to work out the answer. And the questions ranged from identifying a figure of speech, to identifying verb tenses, to giving the setting of the passage that we were reading.
Okay, so go over your translations together. Somebody be in charge.
Quibus imputatis curinis perfecto quantus in Augustus Vestus si gloria dilatare velet. Studying and learning Latin is relevant for people today because it just gives you an insight of what it was really like, and just like you're there in Roman times, you get to see what the Romans wrote actually and then translate it yourself, and to get a real big insight into happened at that time and what they had to say. In what narrow regions your glory is willing to extend itself.
I just found Latin to be really interesting because I'm very interested in the past, especially ancient history. Some days we'll be listening to music, some days we'll be watching a movie, and all of these varied experiences really connect to the class.
I'm going to bring around a piece of construction paper for you to write your answers onto, and then we're going to share so that everybody has the answers to all 7 questions, okay?
It's active and it has to be a subjunctive. The A is the form of the subjunctive, so kupiat, it's might, wish.
Goes down here. We're born. That's passive.
Color coding, I think, is a really important aspect of the Latin class. They get to identify certain parts of speech, certain cases, certain endings, certain grammatical conventions by the color with which we mark it, and they can make another connection and how it actually fits together into syntax, into the language.
Let's also compare that with audiet. What tense is that?
Present.
Audio, audis, audit. Audimos, audite, thank you. Very good. It is future. So we have 2 future tense verbs right next to each other. What did we decide? Oh, and good, we got the kupiat. What's our little mnemonic device for...
She wears a diamond.
She wears a diamond, and there's our IA.
In class, I am continually asking questions. Sometimes I won't finish a sentence, and I'll leave the sentence open for them to fill in the blank, and it becomes almost a dialogue.
Optime. You guys just have little stickers today.
Narrowed it down to one
of these two. Alliteration.
Yeah.
What made you think alliteration?
She thought alliteration and they sound.
You could make a very good case for alliteration. You could.
Can it be both?
It could be both, yes. Okay. But what I was looking at, and what you should be looking at, let's see, is the UM. What's the second one down? Genitive. Good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and nostrum is genitive as well, and tuum is nominative in its neuter, right? And it's going with nomen. Tuum nomen. Okay?
So you have nominative, genitive, nominative.
That's correct. And so that gives us an ABBA construction, which is what figure of speech?
Chiasmus.
Chiasmus, good. Okay, so not only supergroup of the 70s, but also chiasmus, ABBA. Okay, well done. Very well done. Okay, let's see. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, are we ready to come back together? Yes, okay.
They were to then present their question and answer to the class so that each class member would have an entire complete set of answers to all 7 questions.
Let's first, before we answer our questions, let's read through our translation. Amir, would you read the Latin for us?
Okay. Ex his ipsis cultus notisque terris num aut tuum aut quisquam nostrum nomen vel.
Let's have, Allison, would you read the English back for us, please, for those 2 lines?
Okay. From these lands, cultivated and known surely, your name, could or of any of us could, and next part is, climb over the Caucasus which you see, or swim across the Ganges.
Very good, the Ganges. Okay, Matt, would you please set the stage for us? Who is speaking and who is present during this passage?
We have Scipio the Elder speaking to Scipio and his father Apollos, and we know that because he's been speaking for several chapters now to both of them.
Well done. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have the rhetorical question. What are the 3 introductory words to the rhetorical questions?
Num, which means surely, queen.